This week's episode of the Happy Accidents podcast is an incredible tale, one of resilience,
Because in high school, I was very depressed. I was going through a lot of anxiety, going through emotional dysregulation.
one of discovery,
That is correct. I got diagnosed when I was 28 years old last year in April, actually.
and one of hope.
So reach out to somebody, whether it's a friend, family member, someone that you can trust, or a mentor. Ask for help.
Hey there, friends. This is Dennis Geelen, author of the Happy Accidents newsletter and the book, The Accidental Solopreneur. Welcome to another episode of the Happy Accidents podcast, where we dive into true stories of wildly successful people, products, or businesses, all of which can trace their success back to a chance encounter, a serendipitous event, or a fluke invention. In each episode, we unravel the tales of unexpected triumphs and the remarkable journeys that led to their incredible success. I'm on a mission to explore the fascinating world of happy accidents, and I'm thrilled to have you along for the ride. So, why should you tune in? Well, besides the entertainment value of these incredible stories, there's a hidden treasure trove of lessons that we can learn from them. Whether you're an entrepreneur, a creative mind, or simply someone who enjoys a good narrative, this podcast is your go-to source for inspiring stories and valuable insights. Get ready for a roller coaster ride of surprises, a dash of luck, and a sprinkle of wisdom. This is the Happy Accidents podcast, where success meets serendipity. Let's jump into today's adventure.
Nick Kyriazopoulos is a coach working with neurodivergent young adults with ADHD to help them harness their hidden powers and thrive in their careers. He gives them tools, advice, and accountability to thrive at their workplace, increasing productivity, staying organized, and making them top performers at their jobs without getting burnt out. And the best part, he's had some amazing happy accidents along his journey. Nick, welcome to the Happy Accidents podcast.
Let's go. So poetic, Dennis. I love it.
Hey man, it's your story. It's your background. I'm just reciting it. But yeah, so awesome to have you here. We've been connected for a while. Love your story, and I just love the fact that you're going to get to share it today for the audience. So I want to dig in a little bit with your background and kind of lead up to these different things that have happened to you along the way. You've got an interesting story that's led to where you are. So let's dig into that. Today, you help young adults with ADHD. You
That's right.
yourself have ADHD yourself, correct?
That is correct. I got diagnosed when I was 28 years old last year in April, actually.
Right. So you didn't know you had ADHD. Maybe you had an inkling, but you had the official diagnosis at 28. That was a year ago. You're 29 now, correct?
Yes, I'm turning 30 in October.
Okay.
And
Big
yeah,
milestone.
I was undiagnosed for quite some time, and I was not aware that I had it. And when I got diagnosed and I found out that I had it, I realized a lot of the symptoms and all the reflections that I had from just being a little kid and being an adult, because being a little kid with ADHD is different than being an adult with ADHD. And sometimes you don't know the transition. So when I reflected when I was a little kid, I was very hyper, highly imaginative. I was all over the place. I wasn't even paying attention to class. And I would spend a lot of time playing a lot of video games. So my head was always in the clouds all the time. And as I got older, I have the combination of hyperactive and inattention. So not only am I hyperactive and fidget and, have a hard time concentrating, but I also have the inattention part. So there's a combination that comes with it. And because of that, and the fact that I didn't untreat it, it was untreated, it kind of made it very difficult for me to, I guess, live my life, but also work at a job because I was all over the place.
Right.
I wasn't doing well at my job or any of my jobs because I would forget something or there's instructions that come, right? So there's always something that effectively just made me um, just not perform my best. And once I found out that it was ADHD, everything made sense.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people say that. It's like, oh, now that that diagnosis is there, I can reflect back and boy, that makes sense. I want to dig back into your childhood a little bit more because um, I've been a parent of young children in the past. They're grown up now,
Yep.
but it almost seems like every kid could be diagnosed with ADHD. A kid is hyper by nature. A kid doesn't listen by nature. You have to. So it probably for your parents, for your teachers, maybe it didn't appear as though there was anything different. Just, oh man, how do we get Nick to listen to us? How do we get Nick to pay attention? Did
Hmm.
you find that you were different than other kids, or was it just like there's not a whole lot of difference here? A lot of kids are hyper, a lot of kids, and but man, why can't I just focus in class? Or was it obvious to you that boy, there's something a little different here?
It's funny that you say that because there's a lot of factors that come into play when I was a little kid. Because number one, I was raised in Greece when I was little, so I went to like a Greek school.
Mm,
So I don't know if they take mental health seriously when I was over there when I was a little kid. And there's also a factor that maybe there was a time where maybe the teacher told my mom that I had ADHD, but the thing is, my mom thinks I'm a perfect kid, so she doesn't think like I have ADHD or any of this like
right.
neurodivergent symptoms. And I think that's what it was. And when I was a little kid, I never really thought I was different. But I know for a fact that I just had a hard time paying attention and I just didn't
Right.
care. I didn't care about being in class. I wanted to have fun. I wanted to have a good time. I wanted to run around and play with the kids. I wanted to go to recess. I wanted to like exert that energy.
Yeah.
And again, I was a bit of a troublemaker. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I had this story when I was a kid where I used to play tag with the kids in Greece, and I was very aggressive and very competitive. And what I used to do was I used to trip the kids that try to catch me, and I ended up getting in trouble. And it didn't sit well. So yeah, so I was a bit of a troublemaker when I was a little kid, but over time that kind of calmed down as I
Right.
got older.
Right. So yeah, the normal kid hyperness starts to wear off a little bit, but you've still got this extra hyperness from your ADHD. You've still got this inability to focus as well, whereas other kids are starting to grow out of their kid phase and maturing and maybe slowing down a little, not as hyper, focusing more. You're still having these symptoms. Maybe they're getting a bit better, but
Hmm.
you're still having a lot of these symptoms. I understand though that as a teenager, you started to learn to play guitar. Actually, before we go there, when did you move from Greece to the US?
That is a great question. So when I was born here in New York City, Manhattan, and
Okay.
then immediately afterwards, I went straight to Greece for 7 years. I lived in Rhodes, a beautiful island in Greece, with my mom's family. And it was great. It was very peaceful. It was very relaxing. The beach was like 5 minutes 5 minutes away from us. So I was living a really, really good life. Let's just put it that way. I was very spoiled as a kid. And then afterwards, my mom and dad decided to basically ship me back to New York. It's like, okay, Nick, it's time for you to go back to New York. And at the time, I thought New York was like, up the island somewhere, but no, it was across the ocean. So I didn't expect that. And then my whole life changed. And now, English was my second language. So I had to learn English, even though I was speaking Greek at the time. And I felt so foreign. And I felt such an outsider because not only was I an outsider because I was foreign, but I was also an outsider because I was different. So
Right.
that's
Yeah.
another, factor that came into play. And so for a very long time, I had to pretend to be somebody that I wasn't because I wanted to fit in. And a lot of that stemmed from just uh, fear of rejection, and that could be part of ADHD as well. Like we don't know how to take rejection very well, and so we try to basically fit in uh, to be part of society or to just be part of a group
Wow.
and feel accepted. Yeah, and ever since then, I've been living here, New York City,
Wow.
Queens. Yeah.
So at the age of like 7 or 8, you had a few cards stacked against you. Unbeknownst to you, you had ADHD, but you
Yes.
take on top of that, now you're being pulled out of, your what you know as your home in Greece, and you're now supplanted in a different country, a different culture,
Yep.
a different language. You're the new kid at school. That comes with all kinds of anxiety on top of your ADHD. So that must have been a real rough transition for you. Obviously, you handled it by tripping the kids, chasing you,
I
and
tripped the
other things.
wire, all right.
Yeah. But yeah, so moving into your teenage years, was playing guitar a bit of an outlet for you, or was that intentional, or how did that come about?
Well, you're gonna love this story. So I never had any ambitions to like play guitar or anything like that or be in a band. But music did help me go through a lot of stuff, especially when it comes to my emotions. And uh, just wanted to throw that out there. When you talked about anxiety and all this stuff, yes, it's very prevalent, especially with ADHD, because we have this thing called emotional dysregulation. And a lot of people don't talk about the emotional aspect of ADHD, which is our amplified emotions. So dealing with that as a kid was very, very difficult and hard. So, yeah, I had to go through that. And music was an outlet for me to basically relax my brain and to cope and to kind of go through the motions in life. And so this story, and I always love telling it because this was really a serendipitous moment. And I know how much you love about serendipity, right?
Let's
Um,
hear it.
all right. So I was in Spanish class in junior year of high school. I had a friend that I was close with at the time, and we had a same love for music. He would share me albums. I would share him some albums, even though he had a whole slew of catalogs. So he introduced me to a lot of bands like Rush, Yes, Neil Young. I mean, so many bands. Okay. If it wasn't for this guy, I wouldn't be where I am. So one day I'm sitting next to him, and I've noticed there was this man who was a substitute teacher that has been substituting for a while in my school. I guess he was trying to like cover one of the teachers. And there's a talent show that was coming up, and I didn't really care for it. I was like, oh, it's a talent show. Okay, so what? Whatever. Didn't really care about it. And then my friend Sean, he was like, hey, by the way, you know that substitute teacher that is working right now? I'm like, yeah, what about him? The guy with the golden hair, almost looks like he has a lion's mane. He's like, yeah, that guy. So next door, he's actually doing auditions for like a band. And at the time, I was listening to a lot of the Beatles. And when I was listening to the Beatles, I envisioned myself being like a fifth Beatle or like just being part of the Beatles, right? Because they were like brothers. These guys are like literally like family, and I wanted that. This comes from the acceptance, right? And I went next door, a couple doors down, to audition to check it out, and I came in there. I went in there, and he was like, "Oh, hi, nice to meet you. I'm Dr. Morrison." I'm like, "Oh, nice to meet you. I'm Nick." And he was like, "So what song are you going to be singing today, or what do you play?" I was like, "Oh, well, I don't play any instruments, but I sing." I was like, "Okay, well, sing me a song." So then I started singing I Saw Her Standing There by the Beatles, which is it's one of their first albums from the Beatles.
Yeah, great song.
Great song indeed. And he was like, "You're in. Welcome to the band." And and then ever since then, I was like, "Woohoo, I'm in the band. All right, what do I do next?" I was like, "Okay, so now after school, we're gonna have rehearsal. So come in tomorrow and meet me at the cafeteria. We're gonna have our first rehearsal. I was like, okay, great. So tomorrow I went into the rehearsal, and I came in there relatively early, like I usually do. I'm pretty good when it comes to arriving on time. And I saw him coming in with like a ragged guitar bag. It's like a brown guitar case that he came in with, like a Gibson logo. He comes in all nonchalant. And, and then next thing you know, he sets it up on the table and he takes out the guitar. And it's this beautiful Gibson SG with a glossy white finish and gold hardware. It was the most beautiful guitar I've ever seen in person. And I was in awe. I was like, oh my gosh, like, can I hold that guitar? He's like, yeah, go ahead, hold it. And so I started strumming it. I started playing with it a little bit. And from that moment on, I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to play guitar. I want to be in a band. I want to be like the Beatles.
So at that point, you had no idea how to play guitar yet,
Zero skill.
right?
But I knew instantly, like, this is what I wanted to do. And so I marched over to my grandparents and I said, listen, I need a guitar, like right now. Like, because they gave me an acoustic, but the acoustic is kind of beat up. So I couldn't work with it. So I was like, listen, I want to get an electric guitar. I want to get a Fender Stratocaster because that's what my mentor recommended me. And I got myself a Fender Stratocaster for $300. I went to Guitar Center and it was right in front of me too. It was in the used section. And I picked it up. I took it home. And ever since then, that's how my journey of wanting to become a rock star pretty much happened.
Wow. So who gave you guitar lessons, or did you teach yourself?
I taught myself. The first song
Wow.
I learned by myself was Wish You Were Here. That song is very hard to learn for on the first try. So I
Floyd,
kind
yeah.
of I switched around a lot. So I played songs that were relatively easier afterwards because I was like, okay, I'm not at that level. So, I started learning like Brown Eyed Girl by Van Morrison and a couple other songs.
But so how were you learning though? Was it by ear, or were you finding?
YouTube.
Okay, so you were doing YouTube tutorials that, so were you also learning music theory, or was it really just here's the chords and how you play them, or how deep were you going?
So when I first started out, I knew nothing about music theory for a very,
Mm,
very long time. It was mostly through here from the heart.
mm.
So basically, I was covering songs for a couple years from 16 to 18. But then once I finished high school, I was like, I don't want to cover songs. I want to write music. I want to write my own songs, like all these great artists that I follow. And I got myself a band together. I started a rock and roll band. I made a few songs with them, and then after that rock and roll band, I went into a hard rock band. I wrote some songs for that band, and then eventually I got into a metal band, and then I started writing a lot of songs. I played shows and even recorded an album. So I've been
So your
writing
dream of
songs.
becoming a rock star came true. Well, maybe not a best-selling rock star, but you were in a band, you're making music, you're playing shows, and it sounds like the music you were playing got progressively harder, deeper, heavier. Um,
Yeah, I was very angry as a kid because I'm not as a
oh,
kid, but like when I was
right.
younger, I was going through a lot at home and just there was a lot going on in my younger adult years.
Mm,
So listening to heavy metal or yeah, just heavy metal music in general. And believe it or not, heavy metal music was actually really good for my ADHD because of the speed and the rhythm for some reason. I
right.
don't know why. It was very therapeutic for me at the time. So it kind of made sense. And plus I just really love the technicality of it. I love, like writing complicated stuff and like odd time signatures and just getting creative with riffs and making it heavy. And that's really what it came down to.
So, so do you feel like you were kind of serendipitously introduced to the whole world of music and bands and playing guitar kind of fell into your lap, so to speak, through that substitute teacher who brought the guitar in. You discovered this and went on this journey for a few years
Yep.
of playing music. Do you feel like that inadvertently took you down a path that almost saved you because of your ADHD, because of the situation you were in, your anger, adjusting and unaware that you had this ADHD problem, but knew that you were different? You now had several years of learning to play guitar, learning how to write music, playing in front of people, having this outlet during a very important time of anybody's life, your late teenage years, your early 20s. That's a pivotal time. Having
Yes.
that outlet, having that way of dealing with, unbeknownst to you, your ADHD at the time. Do you feel like that was a pivotal kind of accidental discovery for you?
100%.
Mm.
And I say this because not too long ago, Dennis, I was really thinking about it too. And I'm really glad you brought that question, because I truly believe that there is definitely a higher power that gave me the ability to play music as a way to help me overcome the situation. A lot of situations. Had a lot of people who were discouraging and didn't believe in me. And music was like my saving grace, as I like to call it.
Yeah.
That's what I really call it. It was my saving grace. It helped me get through a lot of stuff. And more importantly, it made me who I am today. It made me the confident individual or creative individual that I am. And I feel like my ADHD is a creative superpower that helped me understand, like, hey, maybe it's not only just music that I have the superpower. I can use the superpower in other things other than music.
Right. Yeah. So I want to dive into that a little bit, and then we'll get back to your journey, because it doesn't end there.
Yes.
We got up to your early 20s. You're going to be 30 later this year. So we
Yep.
still got more to uncover. But you mentioned, hey, I realized there was some sort of divine intervention here. There was some sort of higher power. You and I have talked offline. We share a faith,
Yes.
right? We both believe there is a creator, it is God, and he does
Yes.
play a role in our lives. Looking at this situation from the outside in, somebody could say, oh, you kind of stumbled across, this substitute teacher. He wasn't even supposed to be the main teacher. He just happened to be substituting. You got introduced to him. You just
Yeah.
happened to then, from your friend, kind of get introduced to music. And hey, maybe you should go try out for this band. You get in, you then discover guitar, you then start playing guitar. The perfect guitar just happens to be sitting right in front of you at the used music shop when you get there, the exact type of guitar that you're looking for. And
Yep.
getting into music takes you down this path that, unbeknownst to us, we don't know how your life could have turned out, but maybe saved you from going down a much different path. Do you feel like God had a big hand in taking you down that path?
Yeah.
And
God
and
saved me.
and when did you come to realize that or see that? Was it in the moment, or was it years later were you like, wow, I think that was God's hand at work?
So I'm going to be honest with you, Dennis. Um, I lost faith in God and Jesus because of my father.
Mm.
He's mentally ill. He has bipolar and schizophrenia. And when I was growing up, he would use that as a way to kind of basically scare me and to kind of weaponize Christianity to sort of manipulate me, or just to basically do whatever he wanted. And I was turned off by my own religion, because I come from a Greek Orthodox background, as you know. And I felt very lost, Dennis. I felt very, very lost. And I wasn't even aware of all the stuff that was happening when I was growing up. But when I look now that I've come back to Christ and I came back to God, it all made sense. Everything made sense. He forged a path for me. He was there when I didn't believe because he knew that I had a good heart. He knew that I was a giver. He knew that I took care of people. Yeah, I've done some bad things and I'm not perfect, but my heart was in the right place. And I think over time, not only did God save me from this bad situation, but he made me a lot stronger. And he made me who I am today. And he prepared me to become an ADHD coach.
Yeah, I love that. I love that reflection. I love that you can go back and see those threads throughout your life. Similar, I'm assuming, to when you were diagnosed with ADHD. It all makes sense now. You can and look back through the threads of your life and go, it makes sense now. I can see what God was doing there. Okay, so let's
Yes.
pick back up on your journey. Now you're in your young 20s. You kind of went through this band phase. Did you go right from high school into any sort of post-secondary education? Or
Yeah. So I did go to college. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in communication design. So communication design is basically marketing or advertising design.
right.
And to tell you the truth, when I went to college, Dennis, I didn't really care. I was just
You
there
weren't
for
into
the,
it?
well, I loved meeting people. I loved, the interactions. But when it came
Right.
to classes, I was daydreaming about the band. I
Gotcha.
wanted
Yeah.
to get together with the boys
It was all
and
about the
write
music.
music. It was all
Yeah.
about the music, Dennis. It was all about the music. And, you know, for me, college was more of a chore for my parents because my parents wanted me to get a degree and get
Right.
something to kind of show off to all my other family members. Oh, look, our son got a
Yeah.
degree. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But eventually you do go into 3D animation. How
Yeah.
did that come
So,
about?
so basically, I started off with graphic design, right? I worked for creative agencies, and there was one particular agency that I was working with, and at the time, it was a very toxic environment. That's number one. Number two, I was learning a lot on the job, but I was doing multiple things and wearing different hats all at once, and I was getting underpaid for it.
Hmm.
So there was a guy, or my manager at the time, or my creative director. He was using 3D programs like Cinema 4D to create 3D models, and he lit everything, he animated everything. And I thought that was really cool. I was like, oh wow, that's really cool. Like I want to learn this stuff. So I wasn't really interested in the still stuff like the Photoshop, the Illustrator, and the InDesigns or whatnot. But I was really interested in the 3D stuff because that was cool. And I was into video games. So for me, that was kind of captivating. That's what kind of like grabbed my attention. Um, and I gave it a shot. Like I tried to learn during the pandemic when I got let go because they were letting go a lot of people during the pandemic. And so I got myself a Windows PC computer, a custom built, and I've just been learning 3D during the pandemic. And I was watching a lot of YouTube videos similarly to learning guitar. So same thing.
Right. So you go down this similar path of it was guitar in your teenage years. Now it's graphic design. Now it's 3D animation. You're diving into this. Was that like a new outlet for you?
Yeah, it was like because you know what happened at that time as well. The band broke up. We had a pretty bad breakup, and I stopped talking to one of the members of the band because we didn't get along very well. So I kind of wanted to give music a break. So that's when I explored 3D as like a different avenue. So I kind of slightly pivoted, but music was still on my mind. But
Right.
I was just trying something new just to see if like this is something for me. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And they're both creative things, right? It's not like you went from, some sort of arts thing to now I'm going to dive myself into data and math, right? You're still attracted to the creative side of things. music on one hand, now it's graphics design and animation. I'm assuming you find this again to be a great way to handle your ADHD
Yes.
symptoms. Again, unbeknownst to you at the time, that you weren't diagnosed with ADHD, although we are getting closer to that, I'm assuming, because now we're up to 2020 is when the pandemic was. This is 2024, we're recording this. So that's only 4 years ago. I'm assuming you're around 24, 25 at the time that this was happening.
25, 26. Yeah.
Okay. So you have a bit of a career then in the graphics design area, but then another pivot happens for you.
Yep.
Eventually, you get diagnosed with ADHD, and spoiler alert, now you coach people with ADHD. So how did that all come about?
Oh, this is going to be a story. All right. So basically, when I got my graphic design creative agency job, this was the job that I previously had before. I kind of had to stop with 3D because I was working a 9 to 5, and plus I had to put all my attention into that creative agency. It started really good at first, but then as time went on, I started to notice some toxic traits about the company or the place that I was working. Um, my creative director wasn't really that friendly, and he wasn't really that approachable, and I felt like he didn't want to be bothered. So even if I asked him for help, he wasn't really attentive when it came to that. And then I had another boss, but he's like the CCO. I think that's Chief Creative Officer. So like he's like the higher up. He was all over the place. He was always taking calls. Like he didn't really care about people's well-beings and all that stuff. And sometimes he'll embarrass you in front of everybody. He definitely had ADHD, but it was like very heavy emotional dysregulation, because if something like sets him off, he'll get really upset. And he was all like bouncing, like he was always all over the place. He was always running. That was like and that's when it came to the reflection. Um, but yeah, when I was working, I was underperforming. I wasn't doing good. I was going through a depression, anxiety, and as well as my undiagnosed ADHD. I didn't know how to harness those superpowers, and I was falling behind on task. I wasn't giving deadlines on time, or I always missed certain details in design, and then my creative director would get upset with me. Um, I burnt out so many times I lost count, and that also affected my performance at my job. So overall, everything that I'm trying to help people with ADHD, I pretty much have experienced it all. And eventually it got to the point where like because they have like those yearly reviews, that was their opportunity to basically get rid of me, because it's like, okay, well, he's underperforming. Let's figure out a way to get rid of this guy without having to, because they didn't want to fire me right away. I think it's because they don't want to pay for the unemployment. So they were trying to quiet fire me, which is basically hate my job to the point that I quit.
Where you leave on your own. Yeah.
And I was at the verge many, many, many times. And it was getting to the point where even music wasn't even helping me.
Mm.
Can you believe that?
Wow.
So music was,
yeah.
yes. So music wasn't even helping me. And I didn't even know what to do. So at the end of 2022, 2022, I got a therapist because I needed help. And this is the first time I ever had a therapist, ever. For a very long time, my mom was against therapy. I even asked her about therapy, and she's like, what are you? There's nothing wrong with you. What are you talking about? Right? So she always discouraged mental health. So she wasn't a mental health advocate.
Mm.
But I had to do it. Like I had like my gut feeling was telling me like I need to do this.
So was there anybody else kind of supporting you in that decision, or was it just, I think I need this? And how did you find the therapist that you ended up going to?
So I didn't know what to do. So I did go to my mom, and she did recommend me like a website to go to, because my brother was having therapy, but like he didn't really have like a good therapist. But I was in dire need. Like I needed a therapist. So I was like, listen, I'll take whatever I can get.
Mm.
And at the time, I even told my friends, my two best friends, and I told them like, hey, like I'm gonna do this because I'm a mess. I'm a total wreck. I'm not doing well. I'm underperforming. I'm going through this review, and it's giving me a lot of anxiety and depression. And I just really need this. And two of those guys were really supportive. And funny enough, around that time in December, while I was under review, I first met my girlfriend there too.
Mm.
And eventually, around January and February, I was dating my girlfriend. So she was kind of being supportive, even though like I was going through the review. So I was working remotely or I was going to work. So we were hanging out. And then while I was over at her house on February 13, the day before Valentine's Day, they they were like, "Oh, hey Nick, can we talk to you?" And I already knew, like way ahead of time, like,
Here it
yeah,
comes.
here it comes. This is it. And they tell me, "Hey, because you didn't do well and you didn't meet up to our standards, we have to terminate your employment. Here's your here's everything. Bye, Felicia."
Mm. So, had you already had some sessions with your therapist by this point, or how was that converging?
I have. She was okay. Like she was helping me in some aspects. Like I did overcome like certain negative feelings, but then I had to stop my therapy with her because I think like in March, like after I got, fired, um, she disappeared. They called me up and they're like, "Oh, hey, your therapist is no longer working with us. Um, so you need to find a new therapist."
Oh boy. So now you've lost your job and your therapist. Good thing you had some support of friends and your girlfriend. But
Yeah,
that must have felt like another low point for you.
it was such a low point for me to the point where I felt like I was such a burden,
Mm.
especially to my girlfriend, because you don't want to be in a very low point in your life when you're dating somebody, you
Mhm.
know? Like you want to be in a good place,
Right.
and you're happy with yourself. And I was not there, but I was dating her because there was something about her that I just wanted to really make things work. And she wanted to make things work with me too, because she was just as serious as I was. So during those times, those tumultuous times, she was there, but she was taking a lot of hits from my depression and my anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah. She
And
was bearing the brunt of it. Yeah.
yeah, and the emotional dysregulation did not help because when it comes to emotional dysregulation, Dennis, like you will snap, you will like, just get upset really easily. You'll get easily irritated, especially when you don't know how to control those feelings.
Yep.
And
So just to clarify, you still had not been formally diagnosed yet with ADHD.
correct,
Right.
correct.
Right.
I did
So
not know.
all these emotions are going on inside you. You don't have a good grasp as to why. Um, were you kind of playing the victim card? Were you angry at the world, at your bosses, at the fact that your therapist is no longer around? Like, how were you dealing with this?
Oh yeah, I blamed everything on my parents.
Mm.
I was like, they're the cause of why I am today.
Right.
And I did play that victim, like I'll be honest. And but that didn't really help my problem.
Right.
And so after a couple months, I did end up deciding to find another therapist because it was getting even worse from there. Like I was going even lower. And there were a lot of things happening too at home. Like for example, like my dad was talking to scammers and the scammers basically gave some info to like infiltrate like our Wi-Fi router, and basically they hacked all our devices. And then I had ants all over my house. There was just a bunch of things that were happening,
Right.
and I was just getting so overwhelmed
Oh
to the
man, it just
point
kept piling on more and
it
more
just
stuff.
yeah,
Right.
it just kept happening.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't
So
stop.
so you find this new therapist.
Yes. Eh,
And is this where your eyes were opened?
So, so my therapist, Janet, shout out to Janet. She, she really helped me along the way. Um, as far as like my depression and my anxiety, but she wasn't really like, as far as like ADHD goes, like she didn't know I was diagnosed. Like she just helped me with the situation that I was dealing with at home.
Mhm.
And I really needed that because I learned acceptance because of it. And I learned to accept my parents for who they are. And I also learned that, just by talking to her, like she really helped me. Like I just feel more rejuvenated.
Yeah.
Um, Now how I found out about my ADHD, um, she just she was just telling me like, do you think you have ADHD? And I'm like, what is that?
Mm.
Like what is that? Like I have no idea what that means. She's like, well, maybe you should look up some of these symptoms and come back to me next session and then let's kind of talk about it. I was like, okay, not a problem. So I did some deep dive. I watched YouTube videos. I watched watched articles. I read articles. I was just doing the heavy duty research on this topic.
Mm.
And I read through all the symptoms and I was like, okay, yeah, I do that. Okay, yeah, I do that as well. I do that as well. Wait a second. I'm starting to see a pattern. What is going on?
Mm.
Hang on a second. This is already five. And the list keeps adding on and on and on. I was like, do I really have ADHD? Is this really a thing? And I believed it. I was like, holy cow, I really think I have it. And
Mm.
so I self-diagnosed myself and I told my girlfriend about it and I told my friends about it. And my friends are like, listen, Nick, I understand you're worked up about the ADHD thing, but I really think you need to see a psychiatrist to like give you a diagnosis. I was like, you know what? You're right. Let me go to a psychiatrist. Let me get this out of the way and do something about it. And so I went to a psychiatrist or actually a nurse practitioner and I did the assessment. And then next thing you know, I found out that I have ADHD.
Wow. So that must have been an eye-opening moment for you. This is where, again, where you can look back through your life and go, now it all makes sense. And now
Yeah.
you have something other than your parents, something other than situations or, getting laid off to kind of focus on and understand and probably put some wheels in motion to now deal with it rather than just being an angry victim.
Yeah. And funny enough, when I was studying the symptoms and all that, I was piecing it from my experience from my job, from my parents, from growing up as a kid, and I really pieced it together because it made sense. Because here's the thing, Dennis, when you're a kid with ADHD, it's easier to see it because it manifests itself.
Yes.
And usually when that happens, like someone will do something about it and try to help the kid or inform the parents. Now,
Yeah.
I don't remember if I got informed when I was in elementary school, like in third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, but I do know that usually when you're a kid, it's easier to manifest the
Mm.
ADHD symptoms, whether it's inattention or hyperactivity or one or the other. But as you become an adult, it is even harder to detect it, way harder, especially when you have anxiety and depression, because that gets sandwiched in with the ADHD.
Yeah. Yeah. As you were describing the self-diagnosis process, what I was thinking was, man, somebody could just be in a very specific time in their life where those symptoms are playing out because of the situation they're in, the anxiety, the fears, the need for acceptance, the different things. It might not be that they have ADHD. It could be very scenario specific. So
Yep.
always a good idea to go and get formally diagnosed. And in your case, also good to have the counseling because you were going through some scenarios and specific things that were outside of your ADHD, making it even more difficult. So the formal diagnosis and the counseling together is a great way to kind of handle both the ADHD and the scenarios that you were going through.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why I tell people it's really good to be aware that you have ADHD versus not being aware. Because if you're not aware, then you don't know that you have these challenges that you're facing at work or just in life in general.
Yeah. So I just want to recap for a bit, and then we're going to talk to the final chapter of where you are now in your
Yep.
journey. So difficult childhood, well, actually great childhood in the very beginning. You
Yep.
get to live on a Greek island, with your mom's family, growing up in Greece, speaking your native language.
Yep.
It sounds like life was a dream there.
Yep.
Suddenly you're plucked out of that at the age of 7 or 8. You now move back to New York. Whole new world, whole new culture, learn the language, be the new kid at school, tons of anxieties that come with that, and issues. You start to see some anger, you start to get into problems at school with other kids. But serendipitously, you're introduced to music through a friend. You're then brought into a band through a substitute teacher. You kind of accidentally discover your love for guitar, and that becomes an outlet. That takes you through, a good 5 or 6 years to help you deal with what you're going through. That transitions into graphics design, 3D animation. In both cases, it's you kind of diving deep into YouTube and learning a ton of stuff.
Yep.
Um, but then more drama comes, more issue comes through the workplace, some bad experiences that culminate in you getting laid off. And that's really what set you down the path of, boy, I got to really deal with some stuff here. You get the counseling, you get the formal diagnosis, you have ADHD. Another, outlet for you to dive into YouTube and learn about another thing. I see a theme there. You love to kind of dive in and learn these things. And that
Yep.
brings you up to around the age of 27, 28. And now ADHD and helping others with those issues is your thing. How did that transition happen moving into coaching?
Oh man. All right. So here's what I'm going to say. So after I got diagnosed with ADHD, the first thing I did was I wanted to learn more about my ADHD. I want to understand my brain, how it works, how it functions. I want to understand why do I feel these intense emotions and how can I overcome them through CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And, I just became very passionate about the subject to the point where it became an obsession. And while I was going through that, I was also unemployed, so I didn't really know what to do, and I needed to make money. So I went through a freelance graphic design venture because, well, I think it's very notorious that a lot of people with ADHD don't like being told what to do. I think that's just,
Comes with the territory.
yeah. So I said to myself, well, maybe if I'm my own boss and I work my own hours and I find my own clients, maybe I'll like graphic design. That did not happen. And in fact, one out of the two happened. So yes, I like the freedom. Yes, I like the flexibility and all that stuff. But getting clients and also dealing with clients and just working on designs for clients was just not for me.
Mm.
It was a love and hate relationship with design. It always was. For some reason, I just couldn't accept it. I guess it's because I've been invested into it for such a long time. I made a career out of it. Worked for so many creative agencies. It's like I went through so much. Why give up this skill?
Yeah.
And then I got to a point like later in 2023 that I needed to pivot. because freelancing was not working for me. I did not like it. And I started thinking back, what actually brought me joy? Like, what makes Nick happy? And what really made me happy was helping people, was making people smile, making people a better version of themselves. And I reflect back through all those things that I did, from being a musician, from doing YouTube with 3D, all the things that we covered in between those periods. I always liked giving people advice. I was always great at my communication skills. People tell me that, wow, Nick, like, you're very inspirational. You're very, very motivating. And that's when I thought to myself, huh, I helped a lot of my friends get through so many bad situations. Maybe I should be a life coach. And that's when I decided to do coaching, because it made sense for me. And during that time also, Dennis, I came back to Christ. And when I came back to Christ, I felt like everything opened up for me.
Mhm.
So I felt like I was wandering in the desert like Moses for 40 years. But for me, it was maybe 10 or more so years.
Mhm.
And then everything made sense afterwards.
Mhm.
And yeah, like, I know who I am. Like, I know what brings me joy. I know the gifts that has been given to me, but by God and from God. And I want to use my God-given talents and give back.
Yeah. Yeah, so quite a journey to get there, but then a massive revelation, a massive freeing feeling, I'm assuming, when you're like, this is it. This is my purpose. So we're not going to dig into how did you get this up and running and all that kind of stuff. That's a whole other topic for another show, and you and I talk about that quite a bit offline.
Yep.
How to grow as a solopreneur, how to find clients.
Yep.
That's a whole different topic. But now that's what you're doing. You're building this coaching business. You're helping young adults with ADHD go through what you went through. How
Yep.
do I function in the workplace? How do I handle deadlines? How do I handle competing tasks? How do I handle priorities? How do I handle somebody else being my boss? You've lived it. You've gone through it. You've learned all about it. And now you get to help other people do it. And it was a string of serendipitous, happy accident moments. In your case, you can look back and say, I can see where God was at play there. But
Yep.
that's what led you to where you were today. You did not plan this. This was not some plan that you mapped out on, a piece of paper 10 years ago, but it led you to where you are today. I just love your story. I love where you got to where you are. I love where you are right now. I love
Yeah.
working with you offline to help you grow your business. And that's how you and I got together. Another kind of happy accident. And I love what you're doing on LinkedIn to grow your brand, to grow your business. But I want to end this episode with your favorite quote. I asked you ahead of time, what was it, Nick? What's a quote that really stands out to you? And the quote you gave me was, it's actually from Proverbs.
Yep.
So Proverbs 27:19. Do you want to recite it for me and tell me why this quote is so meaningful to you?
Yeah. So the Proverbs is basically, as water reflects the face, so one's life reflects the heart. And I feel like it's a beautiful, beautiful proverb, because it's something that I stand by till the test of time, till the end of the grave. Because a reflection of who you are is how people will perceive you, what energy you give off, the love that you give to others, the kindness. And so be that example, right? Like, that reflects who you are, that reflects your heart, and people will see that. So when I'm on LinkedIn, I hope to God that's how they see it, that I'm a good person and that I care about them, and that And I think so far people have seen that. And the reason why I'm saying that, and I'm not trying to like boast or anything. When I started LinkedIn, I had 0 followers. I had no one. I had no idea what I was doing. Somehow, some way, I met some amazing people, and Summer was one of them. By the way, shout out to Summer. If you ever watch this
Summer
episode,
Applegate, yep.
yep. So funny enough, Summer was one of the few people that I connected with online, and she was the first person that sort of was a guiding light because she introduced me to you, but she also introduced me to Holly.
Mm-hmm. Holly Crawshaw, yep.
Yep. And she noticed that my writing game was not good. And, I totally understand. So she tagged me on your post. And I saw that and I was like, oh, wow, I got to follow this guy. I want to talk to this guy. I literally told Summer, hey, Summer, what should I say to Dennis? Should I give him a message? What should I say to him? Because I was all about, I was like that guy. It's like, once I connected with people, like I'm just like, hey, how's it going? But she told me, take your time, go through his stuff, comment, and over time, he will see for who you are, and you will grow a relationship. Mm-hmm. That's literally what she said. I followed her advice, and look where we are now.
Yeah, you're on the Happy Accidents podcast. So
I'm on the
there you go.
I'm on the podcast. I'm on the podcast, but more importantly, I built a friendship with you. So
yeah,
it's a blessing.
Yeah. Some great advice there from Summer. And yeah, she's a real gem of a person, a real connector, also has a heart for the Lord. Before we wrap up, you've been through quite a bit. So many different twists and turns, so many different things. It sounds like at various points, especially over the last 10 years, you were lost. You were trying different things. Unbeknownst to you, it was giving you experiences. It was giving you skills and setting you on a path that you didn't know you were on. What advice do you have to somebody who's earlier on in that journey and they may feel like, boy, everything I'm trying isn't bearing fruit, isn't taking me where I thought it was? What are some things you can say to somebody, 21, 22-year-old Nick?
Well, 21 and 22-year-old Nick was fixated on music. So I felt like he thought he found his passion, or at least, you know what it is? Like, you could have multiple passions, right? You could be passionate about many things, but find what brings you joy. Find the things that makes you smile. Like, for example,
your curiosity and your passion, and it brings you joy. Love that.
Yeah. That's what I would say.
Awesome. Nick, where is the best place for people to connect with you?
They can follow my page on LinkedIn, ADHD Coach Nick. I also have an Instagram at ADHD Coach Nick. I also have a Twitter, ADHD Coach Nick. So basically everything's ADHD Coach Nick. So
there you go.
If you want to find me,
we'll put those links in the show notes. Nick, thanks so much for being on the podcast. Thanks for sharing your story. I hope anybody who thinks they may have ADHD or somebody who's been diagnosed with ADHD has learned from your story. I hope anybody who is not sure what path they're on can listen to your story and be inspired and be motivated. And I just love what you're about. I love your heart. And again, thanks again for being on the podcast.
Much love, Dennis. Much love. And I also want to say one last thing to all the people that are watching. Yeah, if you're going through a lot like I did, just don't give up. I've been through a lot. Trust me, it's not easy, but find that support. Go to those people that you can ask for help. I wasn't somebody to ask for help because I was afraid to ask for help, but I always ask Dennis for help when I'm stuck with something. So reach out to somebody, whether it's a friend, family member, someone that you can trust, or a mentor. Ask for help, please.
Yeah, it's a sign of strength, not weakness.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, my friend.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Thank you for having me on.
Hey, thanks for tuning into the Happy Accidents podcast. I hope you find these stories as intriguing and insightful as I do. But make sure you don't miss an episode. You can subscribe to my Accidental Solopreneur channel on YouTube and watch these episodes in video form, or subscribe to the Happy Accidents podcast on Apple and Spotify for your listening pleasure. Until next time, stay lucky, my friends.